Hi, my name is Simon Powers. I'm the founder of Classical Guitar Corner. It's an online school for classical guitar. The lesson you're about to watch is on Villa Lobos' Prelude Number 1, and it's part of a 7-part course that is available to members of Classical Guitar Corner. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and if you are enjoying the lesson, maybe you might consider becoming a member of Classical Guitar Corner. I hope you enjoy the lesson. The A section in the Prelude by Villa Lobos comprises very much of a distinct bass line. It's something that immediately picks up your attention from the very beginning, and it's very identifiable as well. This bass line, being so prominent in this section, really deserves some time to think about the sound that you're going to be producing with your thumb. It's quite easy to produce a sound where the nail catches on the string, and you could call it a thin sound. If you're not thinking about it, perhaps this is the sound you might be getting. In contrast, you want to be searching for a sound that is full and thick and almost like a cello. There's two things that are going to help you get that sound. One is going to be the angle and type of stroke that you use in your right-hand thumb. And the second aspect is going to be vibrato in the left hand. The thumb, you can essentially work on this as a scale. And I want you to be going through just playing notes in the thumb. Perhaps, it would make sense to use the notes that we're going to be playing in the melody and really concentrate on the sound that you're making. The changes in your hand, I'm not going to tell you, 3 degrees to the left or to the right. It really is going to depend on your ear and how critical you are of the sound that you're making, how much imagination you have to think, oh, my sound can be better, and I'm going to keep searching for a better sound. So that's my first instruction, is to be searching for the best sound of your thumb that you can make. Really think of a lush, thick cello player. Secondly, if you want to try and bring your wrist a bit further up, that will allow you to go through the string, and in fact it will allow you to do a rest stroke very easily. Now, you don't necessarily need to do a rest stroke on these notes, because once you start getting to the 4th string, you actually might start cutting out some resonance of the 3rd string if you do that rest stroke. But it's a good place to benchmark your sound. So a rest stroke by default gives you a very full sound. So you can start off by playing that rest stroke and then see if you can match it with a free stroke. Just a really nice way to develop that sound, and instead of having a teacher in front of you show you, you can actually use the rest stroke to show you where you need to get to with your free stroke sound. So one aspect might be raising your wrist a little bit in your right hand. It also might be experimenting with the rotation here. And obviously this is a little bit of an exception to our normal right hand position, where we don't have an extremely arched wrist and our thumb forms our standard right hand position. But in this piece, for the first section, you might want to experiment bringing the wrist quite up so the thumb is almost perpendicular to the strings. So experiment with that shape, and of course remember, when we get to the second section, or when we break out of this bass melody section, that you can reset your hand into its default position. So that sound of the thumb, I think, is paramount with this entire section. It really is going to color everything, literally and figuratively. The second aspect I want to talk about in this A section is the accompaniment. If one thing is identifiable, this melody, the second part that makes it so identifiable is the accompaniment. Now, the accompaniment in this piece, along with some material in the B section, is probably the most distorted parts of this piece when we talk about rhythm. People often just cram the 8th notes in between the melodic notes, so without thinking about the rhythm. There's no real structure there. It's just fitting in the eighth notes in between. I want you to start off with this piece playing it with a metronome, playing it in time, and really play it in time so that you can feel a pulse. Furthermore, I want to talk about a bit of a subtlety here to do with the time signatures. Now you'll notice that the whole first section is in 3/4. We have a anacrusis, a pickup note, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the bass line is very much in 3/4 there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's very much outlining that 3/4 time signature. The accompaniment, however, if you look at the first 4 measures, the first full 4 measures, you'll see that the beaming of the eighth notes is not exactly what you would expect for the 3/4 time signature. In fact, it is what you would expect for the 6/8 time signature. We've got this. It's very much a 6/8 rhythm. So if you think of it like this, well, essentially, I'll fill in the blanks basically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What we have here is this meshing of a 6/8 time signature with a 3/4 time signature. Now, if that sounds familiar, you may be just thinking about the mountain of pieces that have come out of South America that base themselves off this kind of use of folk rhythms where we have 3/4 against 6/8. Now 3/4 and 6/8 occupy the same amount of space. They both can contain 6 eighth notes, but they group them differently. And South American music uses this, and it's called the sesquialtera, and it uses it to overlap the two sort of subtle differences between the time signatures and create an instability that feels like dance. So for instance, if we did this as bass, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and on top we played 6/8, that was 3/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? There are two different time signatures there. If we overlap them, we start to get that Antonio Lauro folk music from Colombia and Argentina feel. So that probably sounds recognizable for that South and Central American music. In this piece, it's a little less obvious, but it's still there. So we've got... Now here, in measure 6, we actually do go into the... Look at the groupings of measure 6. We go into the 3/4 time signature in the accompaniment. So we go into 3/4 all of a sudden. So just like Antonio Lauro, just like some music of Jose Merlin and Argentina, we get this mix of time signatures, and it's a subtlety that I think is often missed in this piece. So I would highly recommend that you spend some time feeling what it's like to play in those groupings, as opposed to just fitting those eighth notes in wherever they may lie. Okay, so thumb sound and then the accompaniment groupings. The time signature changes. And in terms of phrasing, in the A section, we have 4 very quite obvious and distinct 12-bar phrases. Each phrase in the first 3 climbs. We have the same beginning. And then here we jump up from the first phrase, we go to a D. In the second phrase, we go up to an E. And in the third phrase, we take this giant leap up to the F sharp. So it increasingly becomes more expressive and also more dramatic with the material that goes on. The fourth phrase kind of just releases into this flourish of arpeggios of E minor and kind of ties up the section. But those first 3 phrases build in intensity. And I will talk about it in the phrases themselves, but one interesting aspect is that they allied with one another. So at the end, let's play the end of the first phrase. This is, what have we got here? Measure 10. I'll do measure 10. Oh, it's up here. And we're back now into the second phrase. Now what we had there was two things. We had the bass line, the melody going descending down to that E. It's a very clear scalar motion there. We also have the upbeat that goes from measure 12 to 13. So that is the restart of that phrasing going into the second phrase. And the end of that first phrase and the beginning of that second overlap, they allied with one another. And this is called an elision. So the question is, what do you bring out more? Do you bring out the bass line? Or do you bring out the re-entering phrase? And I would argue that the re-entering phrase is more important. So you would play it like... So you can really hear that B going up to the E again as the pickup, because it's a signal, it's a structural mark that goes into the next phrase. But it's a beautiful technique that often happens in the music of Bach as well. Finally, I said I would mention it, that vibrato can play a big role in this whole A section, because it makes the melody come alive. And you can put the vibrato on pretty much all of the notes, but obviously the longer notes, the two beat notes, the half notes there, are really prime candidates for some vibrato. What I often see students do is they do some vibrato, but they don't commit to the next note. So they might go wiggle, stop, wiggle, stop. And it's a little bit erratic and it doesn't join the two notes. So the challenge for you is to do this. To do vibrato through each phrase and through from one note to another, and don't stop the vibrato as you go along. Now, I'll probably mention this a few times, but it's worth repeating. In order to practice that element, and also in order to practice the phrasing in general, I highly, highly recommend to play the melody, which is the bass line, alone for each phrase independently many, many times, just so you can get the shaping, practice the vibrato, think about the tone in the right hand, and also there's some tricky shifts that come up, some leaps. So all of those things are going to be better off practiced in isolation and then adding the accompaniment back in at a later date. So that's an overview of the entire A section: thumb sound, the accompaniment rhythm, the time signature subtleties of the 3/4/6/8, the four large phrases, and also the vibrato that we can use to enhance that melody. So now let's dig in to the phrases themselves, and we'll look at some of the fingering as we move on. So I hope you enjoyed that lesson on Villa Lobos Prelude Number 1. You can access the full course and hundreds of other lessons as well by becoming a member of Classical Guitar Corner. You'll find that link below the video. And also feel free to ask questions in the comments. Thanks a lot and take care.